The hiring process, and again, you should have an onboarding process. The process for once you select somebody, here's what happens. The offer letter should describe the terms of employment. So it's usually the job description, who they're reporting to, the rate of pay, the frequency of pay, any benefits that are being offered. So sort of the core things that are particular to this employee. Your employee handbook or manual has maybe deeper information about the benefits that you offer. It's also going to talk about the culture of your company, the types of the reason why people hire you, and then setting the expectations about how you operate in that environment. So there usually is a warm and fuzzy part at the beginning. Welcome to our company, really excited that you joined us. We are the premier blah, blah, blah. Getting into all of that, and then you're expected to, our office hours are this, you're expected to be at work by this time. If you can't be here, you should call this person. And then it's going to continue down the different policies that the company has with regard to equipment and technology and passwords, all the things that go into your business, and then probably have some legal repercussions or legal discussions about equal opportunity, harassment policies, open door policies for managers. So it gets into a lot of these both legal and non-legal issues. The idea with the employee manual is that it's not a contract, and that's a really important piece. There's usually a signature on there, but the signature is an acknowledgement that they have read and understand. It's not a contract for employment. It usually says that in big bold letters somewhere. This does not change your at-will employment, and this is not a contract. The offer letter also is an at-will employment offer. So it should say somewhere in there that this is at-will employment, and either party can terminate that employment at any time for any reason. Every now and again, you want an employment contract for a specific term, where you are coming on board as the researcher who is going to help us with this grant for this purpose, and it's a one-year deal. And there are reasons for that. But your average employee that's coming on board, you typically want to be at will. I mentioned restrictive covenants separately, and restrictive covenants are things like non-competes, non-solicitations, non-interference. So these are actually contractual, and so that's why you want them separate. What we typically do is we set them as an addendum and a contingency to the employment offer. So you have to sign the employment offer, you have to agree to the background check, and you sign the restrictive covenants. We could get into a really long conversation about non-competes and how they're enforceable or not enforceable. But the distinction is the non-compete keeps you from working with a competitor. So I am with XYZ company that does contracting work, let's say, or handy person work, and Amy says, you cannot go work for one of my competitors for a period of 2 years. Probably not enforceable, but that's what a non-compete gets at. A non-compete is generally enforceable if it doesn't restrict the person's ability to work. So if she said that, be any handy person company in town, which is probably overly restrictive. And its intention has to be to protect a legitimate interest of the company. So if she had a business partner who knew all of the secrets, the secret sauce of how she does business, that person, you might get away with a non-compete, at least some sort of non-compete, because they know more than the average person who's going out on the job and doing the work. A non-solicitation is, fine, you can go work for one of my competitors, but you can't call any of our clients, and you can't call any of our employees. You can't steal the clients or the employees. And those are more generally enforceable. So thinking about what's the right level of protection for your business and making sure those restrictive covenants are appropriate and enforceable for the business. The onboarding process, again, you want this written down and you want to do it the same way every time. What documents do you need from them on day one or before day one? Your signed letters, your signed restrictive covenants, maybe your signed manual, your I-9 form. So any of the things that you need, maybe it's a direct deposit form as well. What is it that's that packet that you either want to give them on day one or give them a week before day one so that you can have all that ready to go? Also remembering that you have to have separate files for their I-9 forms. Any medical information can't be in their standard employee file. So there are some restrictions on how you manage the information you receive from clients. Equipment and systems access, this all should be figured out before they show up. You know, there's a lot of times when you're scrambling because, oh, I guess you need access to that system. Let me call the IT guy and get your email set up because it's not set up yet. You know, try to get all this stuff done before they get there so that when you're doing their orientation, you're able to give them real-time information about here's how it works for you. You log in this way, look, here's your welcome email, and let's go down this path. And then the expectations. I mean, this is a critical part of, I think, where our friend Jane in the case study is going to fall down, is that really talking about how this is going to work. Here's how our relationship as an employer and employee is going to operate. And the manual is going to talk about this to some degree, but really kind of having that sit down, if you have any issues, I really encourage you to come talk to me, and really setting expectations about that work environment. And depending on the job, that conversation is going to be different. And ideally, you'll have a checklist of some sort that says, you know, here's some key things that you need to be aware of. It's all in the manual, but for your job, here's some stuff to know about.
Can I ask you something about that conversation versus what's in the job description? I don't know if that's what you're getting at, but job descriptions, anyway, seem to be, mine, for example, is very general, and there's really no teeth at all, you know? And so, are you saying there needs to be a separate, another conversation with another document that adds more detail into what specifically goals and?
Yeah, I think the job description tends to be more generic about here's the stuff you're going to be doing. You're going to be doing invoicing, or you're going to be doing client services work, or you're going to be answering the phone.
Right.
And I think that conversation on the first day is more part of the orientation about here's how we work now that you're here. So it's going to take the job description and apply it to,
Flesh it out.
yeah.
And I think it's also sometimes setting expectations of you of them. You know, we get it, you're not gonna know answers to every question that a caller's gonna have. So within the next, the next few weeks, we want you, here's a list. If it's about finance, send it to Joe. If it's about marketing, send it to Susan. But within the next 90 days, we would expect you to be able to answer, questions related to our services on the first call. So it's kind of setting those guidelines for, we know you're not gonna be perfect in the first, month plus. But this is where we expect, and this is where we think things are going, and this is where we'll train you. We can't train you on everything today because you're overwhelmed, but next week we're gonna focus on this process, and in month 2, then we're gonna really focus on this piece of the puzzle. So it's kind of setting those so people know what they can expect from the organization.
And I think that roadmap is a really great idea, because I think what we tend to do is they show up and, our world is about, we know how everything works. So here's this, here's this, here's this, here's this, go at it. And they can't remember what the first here's this is because they've gotten 16 things afterwards. And so having a roadmap for today or this week we're going to focus on this, next week we're going to focus on this. Yeah.
Speak to a little bit on equipment. If you have a technical person that needs a lot of equipment, like a high-end laptop, if they lose it or if it breaks or gets stolen, who's responsible?
You're responsible for it as the employer generally, but the idea would be if you have an expectation that they're going to reimburse you for something like that, it needs to be spelled out in the employee manual so that it's consistent across everybody. It can't just be this person. Same thing with training. You see a lot of folks who pay for training, and then if you leave within some period of time, it's best to have that in writing as a separate agreement or in the manual if it applies to everybody. So yes, you can do it, but a lot of times that equipment is, company equipment and stuff breaks. So how do you define, what's their obligation and responsibility versus what's normal wear and tear, for example. So.
What about loss of equipment? I've had that happen quite a bit.
I would have it written if you want. I mean, if it's something that you want them to pay for, it needs to be very clearly spelled out from the beginning.